Hello, people. This is Lee Cole, and I have as a guest David Bixenspan. And David and David, how long have you and I known each other? Would you say approximately now?
Total about 5 years.
About 5 years. And would you say that you and I have talked a lot?
Yes.
Okay. And did we ever have any like issues between us, or do you find that have I been honest with you? Do you feel like I've been honest with you?
When it comes to everything I've worked on, anything that you've ever told me that I could check, as far as I could tell, you were being completely honest with me.
Okay. And David, why don't you tell people what it is that you do in general?
So I'm a reporter, mainly freelance, end up applying that to a lot of pro wrestling stuff, other stuff too, but last few years at least, it's been a lot of pro wrestling stuff. And originally I was going to do a story about the Ring Boy scandal for Deadspin, and then just I got a lot of documents that I hadn't seen before, and it was very overwhelming, and I took a long break from it. And then after Deadspin, after I'd started working on it again, was when Deadspin kind of imploded, and I went to Business Insider and ended up doing the long form article there. And you can still find it now.
Well, I'm
I
going to
guess
run
you'll
this.
put the link in the description. Actually, I can send you a link that doesn't have the paywall.
I have it up right now.
But I can send you one without the paywall.
Oh, okay. Oh, without the pay, sure. And
Yeah.
and how many words is this article that you put up with Business Insider?
I think I mean, the pay was per word, so I can remember it pretty easily. I think it was 5,600.
Right. And how many people do you believe that, if you had to estimate, read the story?
I don't know, honestly. I almost feel like more people have read it lately. But it definitely got some visibility. I mean, I knew some like mainstream reporters that were sharing it on their Twitter and stuff. I just put the link without the paywall in the chat too, if you want to share that.
Oh, okay. Let's see.
Yeah, the version on Business Insider India does not have a paywall.
Okay. Oh, there it is. Okay. And I will share that. I will put it underneath. When I'm done here, I'll put it underneath the information. So if anybody wants to click on that and go to that for free, you don't have to join Business Insider without this link. Otherwise, you would have to. It was a very good story, and we worked on it for quite a while. You got some information from me on this, and unfortunately, when they do these stories, they cut a lot of stuff out, don't they, Dave?
Yeah, in this case, it was, I get it to a point that, the focus was on more, the McMahon side of things as opposed to a story specifically about you and your brother. And they cut a lot. I mean, a lot of stuff that I wouldn't say a lot, but they cut some stuff I would have liked to have in there out. And I tried to get in whatever I could at the end. I mean, there's so much more that could be done. I don't know how much you've talked about it on any YouTube stuff like that. I'm sure I had like an old draft that I ended up, getting rid of before, like the stuff about the lawyer switching and all the weird stuff around that. So like, there's definitely a lot more that could be told. But yeah, there's stuff that I would have liked to have been in there that wasn't. But that's always how it works, unfortunately.
And Phil Mushnick, is this correct?
Yeah. So I last talked to him a little bit when Tom passed around then.
And you spoke a few times on the phone with Tom also, right?
Yeah, and with Phil, I reached out when I was originally, starting to work on it because the original thing I was looking for that I figured he'd have was Tom's deposition from when Vince and the WWF sued Mushnick in the New York Post. Because I knew Politico had gotten a hold of it, but the reporters didn't have it anymore and didn't know where to find it. I ended up going to his house, and he showed me these are the boxes that have all the wrestling-related stuff in his attic. Scanned some stuff while I was there, took some other stuff with me, and scanned it after I got home. And he had a lot of stuff that was helpful. He did not have Tom's deposition for whatever reason, which he was surprised by, and I still haven't found it anywhere. But he had the transcripts of the interviews that Tom's original lawyer did with some of the other ring boys and with Barry Orton and Superstar Graham. He had, a summary of interviews that his lawyer's office did, including with you, in '93. He had just, random, stuff that he had, like the exhibits from his deposition. He had his own deposition too, but he had like some of the exhibits, like the stuff that you and Tom had given him. I think the way it seems like, and I think you remembered it being this way too, was that when Tom went to do his deposition, that he also gave Phil copies of some stuff. So there was that, like his termination letter and stuff like that. And I'm sure there's more I'm forgetting, but it was a bunch that helped. And then, also when it was still at Deadspin, they'd also gotten me all of the public records from the Mushnick and the Geraldo lawsuits, and that helped too.
And as you know, David, a lot of people get a lot of things wrong in this because they don't read the facts. The one thing that you've had in front of you with the facts, you've actually read the deposition. Am I correct?
I've read Phil's whole deposition, yes.
Did you ever see in that deposition one time where I claimed to be a ring boy?
No. I believe I believe Jerry McDevitt at one point tried to suggest that you had posed as Tom, but I've never treated that as any kind of legitimate thing.
Right. So, and all the time you know me, did you ever hear me say that, oh, I was involved with that too? I was a ring boy also. No. And I want money because I was abused?
No. And I've never seen anything, and I've probably at this point, certainly more recently seen more than just about anyone else. And I've never seen anything that said you claimed that.
Well, unfortunately, in the world of the internet now, you have people coming up. There was this English chap that did a show, and another show played it. And on it, it said that I was also a ring boy. And I was shocked. I was like, I was a ring boy? And because it was never said. And that's one of the reasons I asked you to come on, David. Not only because of that, you're a very fascinating guy. I mean,
thank you.
I don't think many people know as much about inside wrestling like you do. Would you say that's a fair depiction by me?
I don't know if I would flatter myself that much, but sure.
Well, you know the guys that have done the series on Vice. Am I correct?
Yeah, I did some work on the third season of Darkside of the Ring as a researcher during the pre-production phase.
Yeah, and are they coming out with another season on Darkside of the Ring?
They're saying they are. They just launched the spin-off show Tales from the Territories that they're co-producing with the Rocks company. That launched this week. But I mean, they're saying there's going to be another season at some point, but right now they're doing this, and that this is something apparently that they had been in development going back at least a few years.
And you and I have, and I can discuss this. The day my brother committed suicide, I just got off the phone with him, and I called you, if you remember correctly.
Yeah.
And while we were talking, my phone rang, and I hung up, and it was my brother-in-law to tell me that my brother Tom just hung himself. And I believe you were the first person to know. Am I right?
I mean, I think so. Yeah, I think I must have been the first person you said anything to.
It was kind of weird that day because I had a very good conversation with him, and I never expected it. And unfortunately, on the internet, you have people that use tragedy for their own, and this is something that's affected my family, it's affected me. Do you knowing me as a person, do you think that my brother's death did affect me?
I mean, I would think it would have had to.
And when I talked to you that night about what happened, it was very hard for me to talk to you.
Yeah.
But I remember a lot of people would say, well, right away you did, I did a couple things. I think I did them out of anger, Dave. But when I did my first tweet, you put it out, and it really got out there.
Yeah.
And it's just kind of funny because we haven't really spoken much since then, have we?
I mean, we've talked some. I mean, maybe not as regularly as we were at the time, but we've stayed in touch.
And Do you remember the last time you spoke to Tom before he hurt himself?
I think I ended up talking to him twice. It was at least a few months before, because I think the first time I talked to him was when I was still working on the story, and then the second time was after it had come out. So this would be, maybe a month or so after. So this is, he died in March of last year, so this would probably be like...
It was February. Yeah, February.
Or February, yeah. So this was probably like maybe November of 2020.
Yes.
And, at the time he was trying to remember, because like he definitely had, there was clearly part of him that wanted to share more and put himself out there more. But, I was never going to push him on that because I could tell that like he was conflicted on it. But I can assure you, for anyone who has any questions though, like he wanted this story out there and for people to know about it as much as possible, which I'm guessing is kind of what you were getting at.
Yes. Yeah. He wanted this story out there. There's no doubt. And from what you learned about Tom, you basically knew Tom started off as a street kid, and they had a certain type of people they went in on. And but would you say Tom really straightened his life out after all this came down on him?
From the little I talked to him about it, and from what you've told me, yeah. That he, ended up being very successful working in private security and all that. And obviously it stuck with him in various ways, but he was able to still push through it enough to be very successful and, to some degree use it as a way to find strength. Yeah.
And we're talking about this, just about a year and a half after he killed himself. And what have you heard much since then about Tom, or about people interested in doing things, or what are you hearing out there now?
I feel like, especially coming out of all the Vince stuff in the summer, I feel like I hear about the Ring Boy stuff more than I used to. And I feel like I'll see people linking stuff like Tom's interview with Wrestling Perspective from 1999 more than I used to. Excuse me. But I don't know. It's hard to say. Like, it's weird because sometimes people consider it old news, but like I feel like there's definitely more interest in it than there used to be, and I would say that's mainly from the Vince stuff and people starting to dig deeper after everything that happened this summer.
And do you find it surprising, David, that being that what happened back then with the Ring Boys and stuff, that the companies seemed to go unscathed from it?
Yes and no. The big one, and you and I talked about this numerous times, is that it just kind of seemed to slip by everyone what Vince admitted to, that Mushnick and Meltzer wrote about, that kind of before he made Mushnick his enemy, he had these phone calls with him in early March '92, and he talked to Meltzer about some of the same stuff in that week, and he admitted he had fired Mel Phillips a few years earlier because he suspected he had... this is Phil's recollection of it, but it's a few weeks later, so I'll trust it. Something like peculiar and unnatural relationship with children, and then hired him back a few weeks later, which I didn't realize I had something more authoritative about this. If you go by the interview that Phil's lawyers did with Vince's limo driver, it was Pat Patterson who suggested they bring him back as long as he stayed away from kids.
Right. See, that's another thing. One of the things that affected my brother, and this, is Pat Patterson, when they kind of brought him back, and when he passed away, they were talking about him very highly. Mm-hmm. And and my brother he spoke to another reporter, the woman. What's her name? I can't think of
Jamie Hemmings, right?
Yes, Jimmy Hemmings, and he basically told her that he was very upset because they were trying to make him look like some kind of hero, but he knew exactly what was going on behind the scenes. I mean, Pat Patterson was a man that, if he was doing this to women, what he was doing to the guys, he would have definitely been fired off a corporation because he was so blatant about it. And that's what really bothered my brother. I mean, did you get that feeling from Tom? Did Tom ever talk to you about how it bothered him with Pat Patterson?
I don't think I talked to him after Pat had died, so I mean, it didn't come up that much. I mean, Patterson came up, but not that, just a little bit though. And then like it's before the death and how that was handled, so that stuff wouldn't really have come up.
He spoke with that more about with Jamie, I believe that.
Yeah. Go ahead.
I'm sorry. And Jamie Hemmings, can you explain who she is and who she writes for, so people would know?
Wrestling wise, she writes for Slam Wrestling, which is Greg Oliver's site that originally was part of the Sun newspaper chain in Canada, and a couple of years ago, the newspaper company stopped doing it, and Greg took it over on his own. And Jamie and most of the other people who write for them regularly have newspaper reporting backgrounds.
Right. And she was very emotional, but when Tom died, because Tom told her a lot of things that he did not really talk to other people about. Am I right there, Dave?
That was the impression I got. Yeah.
Especially about sexual abuse and suicide, thoughts of suicide, wanting to harm yourself. And she had a big impact on me also, because I never knew she knew as much as she did, Dave.
Right. And and it's, I'm sure, and I guess like for people who are watching this for the first time, probably should mention too, like obviously, it complicates things that, it turned out Tom had a frontal lobe tumor, and
yes,
because that affects so much with decision making and impulse control that, obviously he'd been dealing with PTSD and depression and all that for years, but it obviously must have had some kind of effect.
Well, they said that it was an inoperable tumor and that he was going to die within a year, most likely anyway. And he had no idea he had it. And all these things, all these emotions that he went through and he suffered at the end of his life, the family was confused. They couldn't understand why he was so emotional the last year of his life. And in a way, it gave the daughters a little satisfaction, because they said, my dad, that's when they realized their dad was acting that way because he had a brain tumor in his lobe of his brain, which it was inoperable also. And, it's just one of those things, Dave, that none of us knew,
Did they have any idea how long he had it?
And they just said it was inoperable because it was too deep to get at. And even with treatment, they don't, it was also starting to spread. So, it was,
he probably had it for a while.
Yes, but the last year of his life is when he stopped working. Tom was an avid worker. He loved to work. And all of a sudden he stayed at home, and he just had a dramatic change about him. And the fact that he would so easily kill himself, and he knew his daughters and wife were on the way home that night. He knew that they would find him. And he went in the room and took the dogs with him, and he hung himself. And this was right after he got off the phone with me. And it was one of the best conversations we ever had. That's why I was shocked when I got that call right after we hung up, about 30 minutes later, maybe, when the girls and the wife came home and found him.
Yeah, because I remember you being very optimistic.
Yeah, because the conversation was so solid. It wasn't like Usually he called me with depression, talking, but I believe that at that moment he knew what he was going to do, and he was just saying goodbye.
Yeah.
That was that. There was nobody that could stop him at that point. And in the beginning, I thought he was selfish for doing it, but then when I heard about the tumor, it made me understand more. It made his daughters understand more, because when people commit suicide, Dave, a lot of people are angry when people commit suicide and abandon the family like that. So in a way, when the autopsy was done, that was like a breath. The girls took they said, oh, it makes more sense now.
Yeah.
And, that's the power of suicide, and it's just one of those things and Tom just lost his sister, and he had just lost his brother. And within a year and a half, they died, and they were younger than him. They were as young as him. So it had a dramatic effect on him. And I could talk about it more now than I could, because I would become too emotional. But now you start learning more about it. And Dave, it's just one of those things. You've seen a lot of tragedy with the wrestling world, haven't you?
Yeah.
A lot of death and destruction and everything. I mean, is there any other way to say it, Dave, when it comes to wrestling?
No, I think that's fair.
Yeah. Have you heard anything lately about any new people that have had untimely endings?
I mean, nothing that jumps out too much. I'm sure I'm forgetting some, but I mean, at least a lot of the drug stuff with the deaths from that and the overuse of the steroids and stuff like that, that's gotten better, at least.
Were you glad to see when the Darkside came out, they actually talked about the Jimmy Snuka thing and the murder of Nancy Argentina, and I'll call it a murder because that's what it was, and the cover up and how much has been gotten away with over the years?
Oh yeah, I mean that was an interesting one, because you definitely had a lot of people who had never really heard about it before, because especially it was during that second season, which was when right in the middle of COVID lockdown, so that was like kind of their ratings peak, because there were more people just watching TV that might not normally be. So it was very interesting to see the reaction to that, but I've never really seen anyone who actually like consumed anything about the case that didn't think he did it, but it's the thing is, for years nobody had seen the autopsy report, which said it was a homicide. Well, he never said anything about anyone else being with her, so
and what
else could it even be?
And what did you think when you found out that Vince McMahon actually showed up and met with the district attorney and stuff?
I mean, that was known for a long time. I mean, the new thing that I ended up reporting shortly after the episode aired, and it was surprising because it was in the same stuff that like the Allentown paper had, but they didn't report this, was that according to it's in the death investigation report, but it's talking to the police who were on the scene that Snuka had the fight with in New York a couple months earlier, that apparently Vince was who talked her out of pressing charges in New York.
And you're talking about the first fight they had, is that correct?
In Syracuse area, yeah.
Yeah, and didn't they want her to come back because they felt like she can control Jimmy Snuka because he was into drugs and a lot of things and he was kind of out of control?
Sort of. I mean, the main thing was that he was illiterate and couldn't drive, and nobody else wanted to drive him around anymore. None of the other wrestlers did, and then they had, because of the cocaine use and other stuff, and then they had brought in Buddy Rogers to kind of be his manager on screen and his babysitter on the road, and then even he just couldn't put up with it, and they, on top of publicity or whatever, Vince needed her to just chauffeur him around, if nothing else.
And that's a very sad story because wasn't how she was 24 when she was murdered. Is that correct? Right about that age.
How old was she? She was fairly young. I don't remember the exact age.
I was reading, and she met him when she was very young. And
23.
Yeah. Yeah, it's just one of those sad stories that when it came out, a lot of people were like, "What? Jimmy Snuka? There was a murder of Nancy Argentina," and it just got out there. But the thing is that Jimmy Snuka happened to be a dying man. He didn't know where he was no more, and he died right during the trial.
Right. I mean, they ended up saying he wasn't competent to stand trial, and then it was like days later after that he died.
We could sit, David, and talk about all these fascinating stories when it comes to wrestling. There's no doubt. And the Nancy Argentina story is just one of the many stories. And what I'd like to do is bring you back for a full interview about this stuff. Would you be interested?
Sure.
Well, I appreciate you coming in and doing this and talking about Nancy Argentina. I didn't expect that. And basically making people understand that I never claimed I was a ring boy ever. Most ridiculous thing that, I appreciate you coming by and clearing that up too, Dave.
Yeah, my pleasure. Always like to set the record straight.
Okay. And people, I'm going to have, when I really get the wrestling channel going, I'm going to have a nice interview with David because David knows so much. David, right now, where can people, I got your, where can people go to read your stuff? I know this right here is your Twitter, right? David Bixenspan.
Yeah, my Twitter's my best thing. I'm setting up something new that I'll probably talk about soon. As far as somewhere I'm writing, but kind of trying to figure a few things out. But yeah, just stay on top of my Twitter at David Bix, and yeah, I've got my link tree on there that has my podcast and Patreon and all sorts of stuff. So
do you have any stories that you're working on right now that will be coming out that you're confident that someone's going to pick them up?
Nothing really right now, but we'll see.
Okay. And are you pretty much going to stay the way you are, pretty much be independent? Are you planning on working for somebody eventually?
We'll see. I mean, honestly, there's part of me that's trying to rely on the wrestling stuff less right now, but we'll see.
Yeah. Now, weren't you involved in a podcast recently?
I mean, I have my podcast. Are you thinking about the episodes we did about the 92 scandal stuff?
Yeah. Yes. There was also another podcast you were involved with. Are you involved with anybody else with a podcast right now?
I mean, the main thing I do is Between the Sheets with Chris Elner, a wrestling historian friend of mine, where each week we go over a week in history and how it was covered, like in the wrestling newsletters and stuff at the time. And on our Patreon, patreon.com/Between the Sheets, each month we do like a themed deep dive where we go over everything about, a certain thing. And we did, because of the 30 years, and then it ended up coinciding with all the Vince stuff, we were doing, the series on the Titan Gate scandals earlier this year, and we did 4 parts on that.
If you could send me the link on that, I like to put that up in the information underneath this,
Sure.
people. So when you read this, when you see this, please go to and check out David's stuff. If you want knowledge about wrestling, this is the gentleman that you go, because the people he hangs around with and deals with are very knowledgeable like himself. Dave, thank you so much. I appreciate it. And I will be back in touch with you shortly, and we'll set something up for that nice interview.
Take care.
You take care of yourself. Thank you so much for doing this. Bye.